I'm Chris. Don't worry, I'm fine.
Okay, well, let's get right into it then.
I just love the idea of 5 minutes later. Let's get right into it.
Yeah. All right, Chuck, you're here. Thanks for being here on the podcast and also just, in the world.
Yes,
The,
you're
the,
welcome.
I was like,
You're welcome for my presence. I don't know how to react to that.
you are a present to the world. So thanks for your present. Uh,
Sometimes.
so I figured this is actually a good guest to have as like the first guest I have back on the second season because you are the person who I've done the most podcasts with ever because we had our own podcast that we haven't done in a very 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 long time.
Yeah, it's every once in a while I log on to the account just to see if there are new listens 2 years later, and there are almost always at least a few.
For Macbeth.
Usually, because that's the last one. But at some point, that like I think I checked it like a year later, and it had somehow like doubled or tripled in listenership on that one episode, and I don't know what happened.
Yeah, Macbeth was really having a moment there, and it really helped our podcast for what it was worth. And fittingly,
Yeah.
it was the last one we did.
Turns out all we needed to do was stop recording, and then people would finally have an episode to listen to.
But I mentioned having you as the first guest of season two, uh, but that wasn't the plan. No offense, but I thank you for being here because I did tell you when I asked you to do this last minute that I was supposed to have a different interview, and it just kind of fell through timing wise. So I asked you if you could do it, and in true Chuck fashion, you stepped in and stepped up to the plate.
Yeah, and honestly, I probably wouldn't have even picked myself as a guest at all. Partially because while I do like being creative, I don't do it. I don't give myself enough time to do it as much as the other people you've had on.
Yeah,
But also, I am probably the guest most likely to completely derail the conversation just because of the way we talk to each other.
fair enough. I mean that's why people love to listen to us and hate to listen to us.
Yeah, the other day I was thinking about like if Jerry Seinfeld ever wanted to have like a serious podcast about comedy or something, and then had Larry David on, they probably wouldn't even talk about comedy.
They wouldn't get
Like it
anywhere,
would
but
just
it
be
would be
Larry
hilarious.
and Jerry. Yes. So we just have to hope that whatever comes out of our mouths, people find entertaining.
Yeah, this is the show.
Exactly.
But you mentioned that actually it's like if I needed to, I could have recorded an episode about pivoting to
Yes.
figure out what can fill the gap when something doesn't go right. And I think that's a big thing that we all have to deal with anyway. But I have to do it quite often when I'm working on a ship. I have a day at sea because the weather was too bad to get into port. So we have to figure out what events and what games we can put on to entertain the guests. And I think we're always pivoting in some way. Things never go the way we plan them. So I think pivoting is an important role plays an important role in creativity. Where if you come up against an obstacle that you didn't expect, you got to find a way around it. So and we're always going to have that. And I think being able to find our ways, and I think you have to be creative to find a new way around it. Otherwise, you're just going to be stuck there at that wall going, well, there's no way around. What are we going to do?
Yeah. Not pivoting is the best way we talk our way out of things, because I don't know about you, but it seems like me and all humans are constantly talking ourselves out of doing something, even if it's just like you go to the gym and you forgot your headphones, and now it's like, well, I guess I can't do this. I'm just going to go home and not do this instead, uh,
Yep.
instead of just going with the flow.
Yep.
Because doing something the way we don't usually do it is uncomfortable. And we don't like being uncomfortable. We spend our whole lives trying to make ourselves as comfortable as possible. So the second anything is different than how we curate our lives, we're just like, you know what? I'm just going to do something else instead.
It is a frustrating thing about the human mind is that we're always seeking shelter and safety and comfort, and being on the couch or in bed is so comfortable and so safe, and nothing can hurt me here. You don't really think about the long-term effects of, well, I'm going to be safer and healthier if I go to the gym or go for this run in the long
Yeah.
run. But right now I feel safe, so my body's like, just stay here, you'll be better. But I can tell you the same thing has happened to me. I've gone to the park to go for a run and I realize I forgot my headphones and I get so frustrated to be like, am I going to go home and get them? Am I just going to not run? And then I realize just go do it. I spend more time sitting in the car thinking if I should go home to get my headphones or not go at all. I could have done a 5K in that amount of time.
Yeah. Yeah. Like we're always looking for reasons to say no. Like
Yep.
that's our first instinct. And that's why at some point, I don't know if you remember, but several years ago, I think I told you when you were asking me to do things to try to like ask it early because my first instinct is going to be to say no. And then I need time to like think about it and decide, yes, I actually want to like gear myself up to say yes.
Right.
And so my first answer might be, we'll see. Because if the answer is not, we'll see, it's going to be no.
Right.
So, so I just have to leave myself the space to eventually, it's an eventual yes. You
Right.
just have to give me time first.
I do. I've told you before, but I do appreciate that you are self-aware enough to see that, and you actually go. I know that my instinct is to be like, oh no, thank you. I do the same thing when somebody offers me, do you want, offers me a seat or offers me a meal, or oh, do you want to come join us over here? I'll say, oh no, 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 thanks. Like part of me is just like quick to say no, like I don't want to impose on them, and I don't know what it's going to be like. So my initial reaction is to go, oh no, I probably shouldn't get into that situation. But then I'll start thinking, oh, I probably should have gone over that. It probably would be nice to have like a meal and a conversation with somebody. But now I've already said no, and then it all spins out in my mind. So saying maybe and then leaving the door open for a yes is a good rule to go with. And you could probably apply that to other things too, like your other, workout plans or whatever else you have going on.
Yeah, everything. Even just the other night when you invited me out to emo night, I was like, that was short notice. So like the
Yeah.
only answer I have at this point is no because that's my first answer for everything.
Yeah.
I would need to. It sounds like fun, but I would need the extra time to remind myself that it will be fun.
Yeah. I mean, I have the same thing. I buy tickets to concerts or I plan to go do things. And then when the time comes, I start getting that anxiety of, do I really want to do this? And like, even though I've done it so many times and I know that when I go, even like hiking, it's like my favorite thing. But the thought of like getting up, getting dressed, going out in the cold, doing the hike in my head ahead of time, I think, well, this is gonna suck. It's gonna be cold. I gotta drive like an hour to get there. All the things that you can possibly think, I will bring up in my mind to try to talk myself out of it. Even though I have hundreds of examples in the past where I've overcome that thought, gone and done it, and I was so happy that I did. Yet somehow the initial thought is always, you probably don't want to do this.
Yeah, it's something that like a lesson I learned from you actually years ago was to just say yes to things
Hmm.
because you're someone who you still to this day, but especially then, like before you started working on cruise ships, you were always just doing new things, like doing gig work, just
Hmm.
because you like to travel so much. So you were never in one space too long to like keep a regular job there.
Yeah.
So you would always go to a place and just do whatever job it was that would pay you enough to be in that area for a week or two and then going to somewhere. And it was just you saying yes to these things that if it were me, they were all things that I would say no to. And if you were staying in one spot, they were things you would probably say no to also. but but they were just all things that you were doing just to do the things that you wanted to do. And so like a couple of years ago now when I started the job that I'm doing now, we were on a podcast with your friend, now my boss, Jocelyn, and I said that I had been doing some copywriting on the side, and she asked if I would want to do that for her on the side as well. And my first answer was no. I didn't think I wanted to do it. And then I realized later, and you said yes to it. I don't know if you remember, but
I
you
do.
said, yeah, I'll do
Yeah,
that
yeah.
for you. And like maybe that night, maybe the next day after thinking about it, I realized in one of your most recent podcasts, you talked about how luck is something you create.
Yeah.
I realized that I had been doing copywriting work on the side so that when someone offers me a better job copywriting, I can say yes to it. I just didn't feel I was good enough at it to say yes. And I realized I should just say yes and see what happens. And so I texted you and I said, I know you said you would do it. I also feel like for you, it would have been, again, another short term thing that would have just kind of gotten you to the next point and then
Hmm.
you would have found something else. But it was something I had been actively working towards. So I said, do you mind if I actually contact her and say yes? And here I am 2 years later working for her as my day to day job
Yeah. I
because I
remember
said yes.
I remember when you messaged me and asked about it, and I was like, I'm glad that you did that because I think you'd be really good at it. Like I think
Oh,
you're the better option for that.
yeah.
But that was like kind of the one of my goals for this project was not only just to make connections for myself and like find those connections potentially to collaborate with people, but hopefully to connect other people too. And like, and I didn't know that that would happen in the way that it did, but it worked out really well for both of us. And I'm really happy that I was able to kind of facilitate that a little bit.
Yeah. And honestly, I feel like it worked out well for her too because
Yeah.
it's a very small company, but when I joined on the side, it was literally just me and her. And now having like a steady helper helped her to start build the company. And now we have, a team of like 8 or 10 people.
Yeah. And that's exactly what I was that's kind of what I imagined in my mind. Not even so much in that specific way, but I thought if I can put people in touch with other people who can help build their product and build their creation, then that is a win for me. So that's awesome. I'm glad it's still going strong too.
Yeah. But the main reason I wanted to bring it up was just because it fell into that quote you had about luck is, you make your own luck because it was something I was actively working to put myself into a position to say yes for. And like the luck was meeting her, but I was able to say yes when I met her because I had put in the work to be able to say yes.
Yeah, that's great. And I feel that that's like something that's overlooked sometimes is that you think you're going to find something and then you're going to start working on it. But if you have the skill set built ahead of time and then somebody gives you that opportunity that you have to be ready for, I mean, it's basically like the idea of having a college degree. They're not going to hire you to do scientific research if you don't have a scientific background. You have to put in the work first. Maybe that philosophy class didn't help out that much, but at least you have the biology or whatever you needed, and this is the same thing. Just kind of putting in your own artistic work and putting your own time out there, and then when that shows up in the universe, you can just say yes, and you can say it's luck, but it's all the work you put in.
Yeah, I mean, a part of it was luck, but again, it was
Yeah,
I created the circumstances for luck to be kismet.
exactly.
And it literally changed my life. Like I got to, eventually she was able to create a full time position for me, so I got to leave my old job and work from home now, and I'm married now, and like my life changed because I said yes to something that I originally said no to.
We said yes to two things.
Yes,
That's why you're married.
yes, and technically I said yes to 3 things because I sort of wormed my way into that podcast with you because she invited you to go on her podcast, and I said we should go on the podcast, and
Yeah.
so
And I said, yeah,
yeah,
of course we should.
yeah,
Yeah. Awesome. Yeah. I mean, saying yes really does end up putting you in a lot better places. Like you never know. Very rarely do I regret the things that I said yes to. but so often I regret the things I said no to.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Like I've actively seen how saying yes to things has changed your life and enabled you to live the life that you want to live, which is a life that a lot of people romanticize but don't want to do for themselves. Like you're a fun person to talk about because every time I talk about your life to people, they they treat it like it's a myth. Like it,
Yeah.
it's not something people do.
Right.
Um, uh, you know, people uh, they settle down in one space and just build their life there. And you clearly that's not the life you want. It's like talking about when people talk about airline captains and they're just like, "Oh, that sounds like such a great life. You get to go here and there and there." I could never do that, and that's what they always say.
Yeah.
That it's a great life that I could never do.
You could, but
You
I
could.
mean,
It's just
you
not
have to
what you
want
want to
it,
do.
and you have to
Yeah.
put the work in for it for sure.
Yeah.
And you have to be willing to pivot and compromise when those opportunities come up because it's not always streamlined. It's not always A to B to C. Sometimes you go from A to E and then you come back and then you don't know where you're going next. So you have to be okay with uncertainty quite a bit.
Yeah. And like you have this podcast about creativity, but it seems like your entire life is creative because you're always having to make new decisions that impact a lot of things whereas my decisions are the decisions I have to make are very different. They're less creative in my just my day to day. Like
Yeah.
you have to figure out solutions, and you do.
Yeah, but I do want to talk about some of the creative decision making that you make, and also how this kind of applies to more than just art. But let's take a quick break, and then when we come back, we'll talk about your decision making.
Sure.
All right, welcome back. We were just talking about how creativity is not necessarily just an artistic thing; it can also be in decision making, and if you have a creative mind, I think you can kind of like work your way into and out of many different situations. Like we were saying, pivoting when you need to is an important skill to have, not just for artists, but for anyone who can be successful in life. I think you have to find ways to get around those obstacles you didn't expect. Um, but that's one of the things I wanted to talk about with you is that in your new uh, career, you must have very different types of walls that you come up against, and I mean, you are still being creative in your new job. So first, why don't you just tell us a little bit about what you do, and then you can talk a little bit about some of your creative pivoting.
Yeah, I mean, I write copy for a very small digital marketing company, and it's 20, so it's mostly like blog posts, emails, things like that, some social media posts. Of course, it's 2025, so most of it at this point is AI, and I use AI just because it's quicker and
Mm-hmm.
things like blog posts and emails and things like those are the kinds of things that AI was like designed to write
Mm-hmm.
because they're a little less creative. They're a little more like structure, form, and information.
No, I know like AI is such a dirty word now for us artists. So I'm curious if you can be a little more specific about it, as I don't really know how you use it. I wanted to ask you about kind of the tools you use to make your job easier, maybe systems you put in place. But first, the as far as AI goes, do you use it to write the entire thing? What sources do you pull from when you feed it into your AI of choice?
So it depends on what I'm writing. I use a combination of ChatGPT and Claude AI,
Mm-hmm.
just because like ChatGPT is better with information, but Claude is better at actual writing.
It's
Like
because he's French.
it's yeah, but it's just better at sounding human, I guess.
Okay.
But so like a something like a social media post, because it's a marketing social media post, it's usually accompanied by some statistic or like a link or something, like something that's easily put into an AI and said, just help me comment on this,
Okay.
uh, like help me like interpret it in a readable format for other people to read.
So you're
Uh,
pointing it at a specific thing, say an article or a post or something, and then you're saying, let's kind of interpret this and turn it into a two-word Twitter post, for lack of a better word, or lack
yeah,
of a better option.
I don't really do Twitter. It's more like LinkedIn usually, so it's a
Okay.
little longer. But yeah,
It's
and
that's
then
another social media that I don't use.
yeah, and then it only turns out what it turns out. So I have to make sure that it's accurate and sounds good
Right, of course.
because so often it doesn't. So I do have to like edit it down and put a human spin on it usually. Like blog posts are more intricate because there's a better chance of because they're longer. There's just a better chance of an AI defaulting to its own AI-ness or getting
Mhm.
things wrong and things. So I usually end up compiling a really big like research document to start from with like because it's all SEO. So I usually grab like the top nine or so like results for the SEO for the search term.
Mhm.
Like I take all of the source articles, all the top articles, throw them all into one like comprehensive research document, and then one thing AI is really great for is taking something big and condensing it down.
Mhm.
So I have this go-to prompt that I use to have the AI go through and find what I personally refer to as like the must-have information, which is like
Okay.
the information that every single one of these articles has,
No,
and
this must be
like
important because it's put in all of these articles. Okay.
yes, and then like the sort of nice to have information, which is like it's in some of the articles, so it's probably valuable, but it's not in all of them. And then like
The chuffa.
like the added value like information, which is usually is me saying I'm writing I'm working on an article about this topic, but I'm using this angle for it,
Hmm.
and that's probably not in these other articles. So add a little bit of research of your own that's not included in any of these
Hmm.
articles, and then like I'll have it create like a smaller document that kind of specifies what is the must-have information, what is the nice-to-have, like what information is not here that should be here, and so I get to use that to build like an outline of like this is the information I want to use in this blog.
Okay. And
And
then do you
then
write the finished product?
so I that's usually when I move over to Claude because Claude
Okay.
is a little bit better at writing things. And then but I will create a fairly like intense outline. Like I'll have my condensed my comprehensive and my condensed research documents. I will use those to build the outline, and I will even go through the outline and I will specify like how to create each individual section. It's usually like 1 to 2 paragraphs that describe, define, outline, or provide an overview of this topic, including these pieces of information. Use these keywords. Use these SEO keywords.
And come at it from this perspective or this light.
Yeah, and just to make sure I have all the information, all the sort of structures for the sections. Like I'll say, introduce this bulleted list, and then if you create the bulleted list, use the structure for it. And again, use these keywords just to make sure everything that I need is going to be in each section. And then I go through and I have Claude create one section at a time. And then I go through, I read each section, I check it, make sure it's accurate. I rewrite anything that needs to be rewritten. And then So I create that, and then I'd move on to the next section, and then like I just do it one section at a time, like working with the AI, like combination of me and the AI making it what it needs to be. And then at the end, I once I have it all done, I even throw it back into ChatGPT, and I just say, "Can you just fact check this for me?
Mm-hmm.
Like
Oh,
just
cool.
like tell me what's accurate, what's inaccurate, what's part like I've already gone through it, but like just tell me anything you find
Right.
that I missed out on." Even though I can only trust it so much because
Sure.
it gets things wrong a lot of the time. But just as like a final step, like tell me if there's
Ex-
anything.
an extra check, yeah.
Yeah, it's not super creative, but I am constantly working like with the AI because like it can't do everything on its own. It can just do it faster than I can. And so if I can get it to generate the first like the initial draft of something, I can say this works, this doesn't work. It's basically like editing at this point, where
Okay.
I can fact check it, change the voice if I need to, make it all sound like one cohesive whole thing, and make sure it's informational and
Right.
valuable.
I
It's
mean, it
it
sounds like you're a conductor, basically. Like you're choreographing this article from the tools that you have. So you're kind of bringing all the tools in, and you're telling this is how it should be written. It does sound like you're an editor, more or less. Like you're
yes,
having your writer come to you and say, "How's this? Does it have all the information we need?" And you go, "Well, this needs to be tweaked a little bit. I'm going to switch this, move this word here, the tense here has to change, and then I think we're good to
yeah,
put it up."
yeah. I've like AI is really good at writing at a sentence level, but at like a paragraph level or longer, it needs humans
Got
to
it.
to make sure that it works. I
That
don't
does
know
make
if
me happy, I got to say.
yeah, I don't know if you've ever played around with AI much, but like it can get super frustrating with the way it does things. Um, like I speak in all caps at the AI because of how often it fucks up,
So you're
and
just yelling at the AI.
yeah, yeah,
Does it
like
understand?
it says it understands. I don't trust it,
I mean,
which is why I have
does it
to.
understand that you're mad at it?
Again, it says that it understands that I'm frustrated. It
Why are you yelling at me, Chuck?
like it will respond with, "I'm sorry, I understand that this is frustrating.
Okay.
Here's another go at it." But it's like it clearly doesn't understand because it hasn't learned the lesson, which is why it only does so much, and I need to be the editor, be the ghost writer, sort of
So maybe it's more like having
be the
kids.
filter.
You say you understand. It doesn't seem like you understand because you just did it again.
I will say that it's one of the things where when you see what the AI gets wrong, you 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 know what's wrong, and you know what needs to be right, and so it can spark this like creative bent of like, okay, but how do I tell something that doesn't understand what this is, why it's wrong, and why what's right is right? I know what it is, so I can just change it, and I will do that.
Right.
But can I get it to do that? And usually the answer is no, not until they update it again,
This
which brings its own problems. Yeah. But I will say using the AI is also unfulfilling.
mm-hmm.
Like I do get to have like a good product at the end by adding my human element to it, but the it just is what it is. That's why I think it's good for work for something like what I do, which is just trying to break through, you know, SEO rankings on uh, a search engine. But
Yeah.
it's uh, there are times like I have been off and on. I'm always off and on working on something of my own, even though I never end up having a finished product because I keep telling myself it's not worth it, and then I don't give myself time to work on it, so it never ends up becoming something. But there's a story that I've been trying to sort of beat out over the last like year and a half, off and on. And there are times where I was not asking the AI to do it for me, but just sort of asking like, is there something I'm missing here? Or just questions because it's a period piece, so just asking it questions of like, what kind of job would exist at this period of time that would
Right.
qualify like these elements. Like, can you just like give me a list of jobs? So kind of like
Okay.
a research assistant. But even then I was like, yeah, like, and I would find something that I really liked, but then I'd be like, it still doesn't work. It kind of like pushed me in the right direction, but I'm at a point where now with like the current version of it, which I just created a new beat sheet for it yesterday or 2 days ago. It now has like none of the things that I had asked the AI for, and it just feels better just because it
Because it
doesn't,
came
you
from
know?
you.
Yeah. And it's again, it's just to go back to doing the thing, because in one of your previous like two podcasts, you talked about how you just need to do it.
Hmm.
You can't just wait for inspiration. So I actually went back and I had started an outline in November for this story, and it's a story. It's been so off and on that this is a story I told you about a year and a half ago, and it's still not to like a first draft yet. But but I still like it, and so listening to your podcast, I actually went back and I was like, well, let me finish this outline, and just in doing like the crappy outline, I know we're getting away from AI, but just in doing the
That's okay.
crappy outline, I was like seeing where the gaps are, seeing what it needs, seeing just learning to like I'm bad at coming up with characters, so just going through the point of going through the act of writing an outline kind of forces more details in there because I don't know if anyone listening knows what a beat sheet is, but it's literally just a list of like the 8 or so main beats in a story. There's not a lot of details in there, so you get away with being vague a lot easier. But going to the outline requires an outline is more of like a almost written in prose form, so it
Yeah.
requires
More
a
detail.
little bit more detail there just to see how things are working, and so there's still vagaries, but it still forced me to just think about it in a slightly different way. Where now it's like, okay, now I can go back and create just a better beat sheet from which I can create a better outline, and that was because I listened to your podcast of like just do it
No. Well,
because
I'm glad that inspired you to get back into it.
yeah, well, I know that that is the truth, that you just have to do it because I know if I
Knowing
just
it and doing it are two different things.
yeah, because I know if I just give myself 15 minutes to do something, it'll turn into a half hour, 45 minutes or longer
Oh yeah.
of doing it. And it goes back to what we were saying at the beginning, which is just say yes. You know,
Yeah.
just start jogging and you're going to keep going.
Yeah.
Unless you're really, there are days when it's not in your
Sh-
brain. Your brain will
Sure, of
just
course.
keep telling you
I
no
mean, there are days when
until
it's
you,
not in your body too. I mean,
yes.
like if it's going to hurt sometimes. And worst case, I can say, I tried it. I went out. I didn't jog. I went for a walk instead.
Yeah. And there are just the days where your brain just keeps saying no so loudly that
Yeah.
you can't fight it and you just kind of, it,
Yeah, you can't expect yourself to be perfect with any of that
it
stuff, of
takes your,
course. But I find that the process of actually just doing it regularly and getting into a routine does make a big difference. Like when I came back and I told myself I'm going to start editing more, I'm going to start working on things more. Not only does it feel easier because it's becoming more, I'm learning more about the editing tools that I'm using, but when I sit down to write or I sit down to edit, I feel less resistance to actually starting. And then when I do start, like you said, I'll plan on working on it for a little bit, and then 2 hours go by, and I finish what I was working on, or I'm just, I make big progress, and it feels good for it to be easier to get started because that always seems to be the biggest hump to get over.
yeah. And I mean, and there are still humps doing whatever the thing is. Uh, the other day I told you about, I forget what screenwriting book it was, but the writer had said when he would come up against like a sort of writer's block moment, he would just sort of write five possibilities for what happens there and then keep going, just to kind of prove to himself that he's still capable of coming up with ideas. He's just prejudging all of the ideas, and that's what writer's block is every idea you think of, you say that's not good enough, and then you don't get it down on paper, and then you end up not writing anything. Whereas if you just get something down and keep going, it's like you and I used to be in a band together, and there would be those times where yes, there is like a little piece where you have to work on it and just keep doing that over and over again. But then there are the times where you're just doing the run through of the song, and yes, you fucked up, but don't stop. Just finish the song.
Yeah. Keep the momentum going.
Yeah, and so like there are even in the outline that I just wrote, like I said that there are there were more details, but there are still points in it where I'm putting things with a question mark because I don't know what goes there, and I'll just put something happens,
Hmm.
and then I just like something happens that causes this, and then I just move on.
Yeah.
I think it was Bill Murray writing for SNL when he would write scenes for himself, and Gilda Radner would when he was writing the initial drafts of it, he would just put like, and then Gilda says something funny,
Yeah.
and
We'll
then
figure that out later.
just keep writing, because
You can get really hung up on that detail instead of it's
yeah,
like cleaning. It's like cleaning your room, and you get stuck on one desk drawer, and then the whole room stays a mess.
yeah. I mean, it's like what we said before, how we're always looking for reasons to not do something, and so if we can, if it's like subconsciously, if we can get hung up on it, then we can stop doing what we're doing and do something else instead.
There's a term, but I can't remember the name of it. It's something like um, productive procrastination, or something that is seemingly productive, or your mind is telling you is productive, but you're working on something that is not actually something you need to work on, and you find something I'm going to do this crossword instead of doing the work that I need to do. So it feels like you're doing something that is productive. I'm doing a thing. I'm not just sitting there watching TV, but it's not actually moving you toward a goal in any way.
Yeah, it's like yeah, I should sit down and write the screenplay, but you know what? I've been meaning to clean up this office area for a while, and it's really bothering me right now that it's not
Yeah.
clean. So I'm going to clean it up so that way I feel better about that, because I'm going to be thinking about that while I'm writing this, and it's going to make this harder.
Yeah.
So let me
It's
do
just
that
another
first.
another trick of your brain to try to keep you from getting uncomfortable.
Yeah, even right now, like I don't particularly like talking about using AI, because it feels like using AI, like I know it's a good tool to use for especially the work that I do, but it's I went to school for writing, so using the AI is like talking about it is uncomfortable.
Feels
And
like a cop out.
I'm the one who, yes, thank you, Kevin Smith. We are a couple of dicks, but
It's
I
the
am the
original
one.
name of the podcast. But
But I am the one who changed the subject, and it was probably subconsciously because I wanted to talk about something other than AI.
well, I think I mean, you really did dig in pretty deep your use of AI. I don't think you really avoided it, honestly. But the only thing I was going to mention from my perspective of, or my side of AI is, I've seen with photography, there's so much AI online where you honestly really can't tell so many times if it is AI or not. And that's a bit frustrating, especially when it's like the subtle things that it doesn't make it something mythological or outlandish that you would go, oh, well, that's clearly CGI or AI. And I think it's a little bit scary and weird, and I don't really know how to take it when it comes to photography, as far as having something that's supposed to be a visual representation of reality. But how long have we been trending toward, digital manipulation of photos anyway? But I found that there's a photographer that I follow called Sam Hurd, and he uses photography in real time. He has his camera hooked up to his phone, Bluetooth to his phone, and he will use an AI program that he takes a photo of a scene, and then the AI immediately spits back a few iterations of ideas that he could pose differently, or the way he could use the light or shapes differently. And then he actually physically goes and puts the people in some of these ideas, or at least he uses them as a jumping off point to start shooting in a different way. And something that just sparks an idea for him. And I think that for me feels like a more ethical way of using AI
For
in
sure.
in art. And because I feel the same way as you, where if I were to use AI to create an image and then post it on my Instagram reel, I wouldn't be happy with that at all. I wouldn't be able to like put that out there as my own work. So
Yeah,
I think having those lines that we don't cross is important.
yeah. I mean, I liked using AI to like create images, but that's because I'm not someone who creates images, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah. Even even just having like someone who wrote something and the AI takes that and turns that into a visual format of like a show or a movie or something like that. It's still removing the choices that the actors make, you know? So
Yeah.
it'll be interesting. I don't know if this fits thematically into any of the things you wanted to talk about, but
I think it's interesting though. I mean, one of the things I was going to ask you was about your hot takes on creativity or your opinions on creativity, and I think the AI discussion would lead directly in that into
yeah.
that. So
Yeah.
the other thing I was going to ask you if you have any half baked ideas that you're working on, but it sounds like we already talked about that a little bit too.
Yeah, I mean there's always an idea. It's just that I never write them down, so they never become anything.
Uh-huh.
Like even
Anything that any half baked ideas that you've had recently that you're excited that you might want to work on or put into a beat sheet?
yeah, always. Like the answer is always yes. It's
Yeah.
just that I almost never write them down. It's you know, I have one that I thought like 5 nights ago. You know, just laying in bed, it was like the last thought I had. Like, oh, this would be an interesting thing, or maybe not an interesting thing, but something that would be fun to write down, even if it becomes nothing. And of course, I didn't do that. And if I sat down with it today, I would probably because I had like okay, like this would be like the end of Act One, like what pulls us into Act Two, like this would be the midpoint, like what pushes us towards the climax. If I sat down to write it today, just in a beat sheet form, I'd be like, what was the thing? Like it's that's just how it goes. Like
That's just
there's always more ideas than work, you know.
sure, sure. That actually that brought me to something else that you kind of touched on a little bit earlier, but I was going to ask, do you have any systems that you use to make your life or your process easier? For example, I know you used to keep a pen and notebook in your pocket at all times so you could write down ideas. Do you have any like systems other than like storyboarding or keeping a journal, anything like that?
No, I should. And again, that comes back to just like you have to make it a habit, and I haven't, which is why screenwriting is not my career. You know, because you have to do those things if you're going to make a job of it. And I just haven't. So really within the past like week or two, I had the thought that it just has to be a hobby of mine now. Like, and that's okay because I like doing it. I just have to I have to understand that it's going to be a hobby, and then I might actually do it because one of the things you might use to tell yourself no, don't do it is it's not going to be good enough to build. Like it's not going to be a movie someone's going to want to make, so why even bother writing it? And then so I just have to be like, it's going to be fun to do it, so just do it.
Yeah, and
Um,
I think I mean I know this has come up in other media many times, but the fact that everything we do kind of turns into how do we make this into our side hustle versus can we just do this for fun? Like we can have a hobby that we do just to enjoy it for ourselves and not have it be for anyone else.
yeah, I actually I saw a thread on Reddit the other day that was all about how there are so many creators now who work harder or spend too much time or spend more time working on how to break through the algorithm than they do on the actual thing that they're creating so that
Yeah.
they become good at marketing themselves but they're not necessarily as talented or as skilled as practiced at the thing that they're actually
Right.
doing
They're
and
really good at marketing something that might not be worth seeing.
yeah and so instead of becoming like the painter that that's the thing that they're trying to sell, they're the marketer of the painter, and their actual craft becomes marketing instead of being able to break through into the next tier of talent because talent is only going to take you so far. Like talent is good
Yeah.
and you need it, but you know the Beatles weren't just people who were naturally talented, they were people who were naturally talented who played music all the time and wrote so many songs that they started playing with the forms. And
Yep.
what if we do the harmonies this way? What if we started playing some of the parts backwards? Like, like it's it
Yeah.
always comes back to the Malcolm Gladwell 10th, like the 10,000
Oh
hours
yeah.
isn't 10,000 hours is what you need to become an expert. It's you just have to keep doing it, and then you're probably going to get better at it, and you're going to
Yeah.
start learning new ways of doing it.
Yeah, I mean the Beatles were dedicated and prolific, and I mean, and that was because of their dedication. They were able to put out that much work because they spent all their time putting their efforts into writing or challenging what they had written already and seeing what they could do to change what was the norm. So
Yeah, and even
that's a good example.
not just trying to be better than themselves too, but like there was competition within the group itself of just like, oh, you did that, let me. I'm Paul McCartney.
One upping each
I'm
other.
going to try to write a song better than John Lennon, and John Lennon was like, I don't like that. Paul's trying to do better than me, and it started as healthy competition.
Yeah, and then well,
Yeah, but yeah, and I mean you know I'm just a Beatles person, so I'll always
of course.
bring them up in one way or another. But it's it's got to be the thing you do, and if it's not the thing you do, it's got to be the thing that you have fun doing.
Yeah, and I think that's important to have your hobbies as well because they can sometimes your next creative idea, your best creative idea can come out of doing what you do for just fun. Sometimes when I go for a walk on a simple trail and I don't have headphones in and I'm just walking and thinking and like just being lost in nature with my thoughts is the best thing for me to kind of let my mind wander because so often we're not bored anymore. And I think whenever I'm going for a walk, I'm usually listening to a podcast. If I'm going for a run, I'm listening to music. If I'm in the car, I'm listening to something. If I'm at home, there's usually a show on or something. I'm usually watching something if I'm not working on something and not ever giving my mind a chance to just think about things and put things together that have all entered it recently. You don't have that chance to come up with anything new. All you're going to be doing is regurgitating what you just heard or what something you've done before because you need that time to be kind of placid and not focused on something. Being unfocused, I think, can be a really good thing for creativity. So, giving yourself the time to not work on something but just be, I think that can be the next spark that you're looking for to work on something.
Oh yeah, I mean, you always have to find the balance. Like
Yeah,
if
hard to find.
if all you do is work, then that's gonna hurt the work too.
Yeah,
As like it's just like working a 9 to 5. If all you do is work, it's just gonna suck.
yep, yeah. If you never have that off time, then you're not going to find your joy in the work itself.
Yeah, yeah. You think doing the fun thing all the time is just gonna keep being fun, and then
Yeah,
it's not. You're
yeah,
just doing it.
yep. The best times I had doing open mics was after I sat down at a coffee shop and just spent like 2 or 3 hours just writing down what I thought would go best, and then like writing down the structure that I thought would work best and the wording, and then making myself like read them a bunch of times over, and then making myself just like a bullet point outline of what jokes I wanted to do that night. So I already knew what the wording was. I already knew what I thought would be the funnier way to say it. And then when I got up on stage that night, I'm thinking of a specific time, but I remember the first time I did it. And then I got up and I felt like not only did it get better reaction, but I felt a lot more comfortable with it because I wasn't kind of just coming up with it on the fly. I had a script that I was trying to make sound natural, and I feel like that made sense to the audience as well. So I think that's a good example of put in the work, and then that'll show when you get there. And that's definitely something where if you don't do it all the time, I'm used to being in front of people, but I'm not used to like writing jokes and getting in front of people with them. But some of the stuff that I did on the ship was trivia questions or games where I would use the same jokes with different crowds, and I would change them and refine them over time. And I found out what worked. So it felt like I was kind of working on my act at the same time, but just with very specific questions and situations. So that kind of led me to thinking, okay, well, once when I have time again and when I have a chance, I do want to kind of put more effort in and try to get back on stage and do some more comedy.
Yeah. Well, I mean that just all goes back to what we were saying before about like just get it down,
Yeah.
and it doesn't matter what it is, and then the next time you go through it, you can make it better.
Though sometimes with these, you write down an idea that you think is funny, and you come back to it later, and you go, "I don't know what I was trying to say here at
Sure.
all."
No, I understand that too, but like I know you like quotes, but it's just like a few days ago I told you that one that I saw on like Facebook recently that said every first draft is perfect because its only purpose is to exist.
Yeah,
So yeah, and
I like
that's
that.
it, essentially what you're saying is like you you got your first draft and it it might not have worked or you might not have liked it as much, but the more you went back to it, like the more you could just kind of tweak it and find what made it work
Yeah,
and eventually turn it into something that you do like and that think is funny, but that's all because you got the first version down in the first place.
yeah, yeah. I really like that quote, and I like the sentiment even more. Well, I think that'll about do it. Thanks for being a part of this. I think the last question that I wanted to ask you was, what are you watching, listening to, reading that's inspiring you right now? Anything?
Well, right now I am finishing up one biography of the Beatles, not the one I showed you, a different one that is also very long. But I have always liked the Beatles, so I like reading books about them, and it's always kind of inspiring to just read stories about these people who were creating a thing and kind of didn't even realize what they were creating. They just knew they were creating something.
Yeah,
And also just again people who wanted to do something and then just kept doing it until it became something good. And really, but really, ultimately, pretty much everything I watch or read or listen to is inspiring. Like even the AI songs that I listen to, listen to, I can't help but listen to without like couching it as like, would I have done that? How would I make that better? How would I do that different? Like why is this working in a way that I like it? You know, been rewatching Seinfeld recently, like that. Just watching things, like taking in
yeah,
things that other people have created is like even just like the Beatles book, like not just their story, but like the way the writer wrote it. I'm taking that in too and thinking about that and really just experiencing things that other people have created is in that type of media is always a little inspiring to me. Like I'm less of a visual artist, so I take less inspiration from like paintings and photography and things like that. But uh, those kind of like storytelling uh, creatives always it's always inspiring at least a little bit. Just especially if I just tune into like there's a decision someone made, why or why doesn't it work?
right.
It's always a little
Is it
inspiring.
style or structure or whatever it is? Yeah, I love that. I love that mentality, and I have the same. I go into a film or a TV show, and I am always kind of watching how the scene is blocked or colored or lit or the composed, and I love that. I love seeing like I see how they did that, and like I love to see like the little Easter egg things in the background that might be foreshadowing what's going to happen. And I like that they took the time to do that. Maybe it's like a time on a clock that means something. And I was kind of, I've always either been predisposed to looking for that or I was taught by shows that I watched when I was a kid to look for that because shows like The X Files did that constantly. Like, not only was it like beautifully shot and lit and the music was incredible, but there were always little things in the background that would either be a little Easter egg relating to a character in the show or the creator of the show. But once I started seeing those things, then I just started looking for them everywhere, and then it just made me very attentive to what was on screen, not just in the foreground but in the background as well. So I think looking into that made me more interested in art because you could do so much with a single scene of a show or a movie, and I think yeah, you're looking at it in scripts or in words, and I'm looking for at it in a different way. Like you're probably listening to the way that characters deliver uh, lines, or thinking of how they're written on the page when they're speaking the lines, and I'm thinking of what camera was used to get that depth shot, or how the camera was moving on the dolly as it came around to get the shot they got. So I mean, you can draw inspiration from so many different facets of all kinds of art.
Yeah. Like Justin is as an example. Again, rewatching Seinfeld. When you were here, a week ago or so, you pointed out something I've also thought about Seinfeld a lot without really thinking too much about it, is that a lot of the episodes just end. Like it gets to like a final funny point and it just ends. And when you had said that, I had already been thinking about how like Jerry Seinfeld is not a good actor, but it works in the show because the character of Jerry is shallow. Like he doesn't have to do a lot of deep acting. He just has to be funny and react to things.
Right.
And so I started thinking about like sort of those two things together because all of the characters are shallow, and they're all great comedic actors, but they don't need to bring a whole lot of backstory into like their performances. And so I started thinking about how most sitcoms, like it's just by looking at Seinfeld you can tell it's different than most sitcoms. And I started thinking about how most sitcoms are written from the idea of like they're situation comedies. So it's here's the situation that we all relate to, but here are the interesting characters. Let's see how the characters can make this thing funny.
Right.
And so they're using the situation to explore the characters and find the humor there. But Seinfeld does it like it flips it. It does the opposite. It's here's a situation we as writers think is funny. Let's use these characters to show you why we think this situation is funny. So they're using the characters to explore the idea, the funny idea. And so they don't need to like get deep into the characters
Right.
and explore them. And that's so instead of building up to when you're exploring the characters, you're getting to the end where either the character has changed or they haven't, and you kind of learn why.
And in
It's
Seinfeld, they can't change.
and in Seinfeld, yes, it was Larry David's like law that they could not change. But so, like, there's usually like a clean ending to a character exploration of the final moment with the character. But in Seinfeld, they're just exploring the idea to its funny end, which is usually just like the last funny moment, freeze
Yeah.
frame, end of the episode. And you don't need to, like, you understand that there's like the next funny thing that happens or whatever, but it takes you to the last funniest moment.
Yeah. None of this will probably stay in.
Yeah, that's
so
fine.
I'll just so I'll just say thanks, Chuck, for being here. Thanks for being on the podcast. Thanks everybody for listening, and stay creative. And I'll see you in the next one. Bye.
Bye bye.